Hey guys, tonight we begin with one of history's most famous men, which is slightly unfortunate for the women around him, because history has a habit of turning powerful women into footnotes, while preserving the names of generals who once tripped over their own sandals. Such is life, or rather, such was ancient history. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, get cozy beneath a blanket, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Because tonight, we're not following Alexander the Great across deserts and mountains. Plenty of people have already done that. Historians love a conqueror. Give a man a horse and an army, and someone will write 600 pages about him. Instead, we're drifting quietly into the shadows of his empire, into palaces filled with whispers, into royal courts where smiles were often political weapons, into the lives of women who influenced kings, survived wars, and occasionally outmaneuvered entire dynasties. Because behind nearly every ancient ruler stood mothers, wives, daughters, sisters, and queens. Some guided empires, some protected bloodlines, some simply tried to survive. And survival in ancient Macedon was not exactly a relaxing hobby. To call the royal family of Macedon dysfunctional would be generous. This was a place where family reunions occasionally involved exile, assassination, or accusations of divine parentage. Sometimes all three. And at the centre of it, all stood one woman, Olympias, mother of Alexander, queen of Macedon, and perhaps one of the most fascinating women of the ancient world. Olympias was born around 375 BCE in Epirus, a rugged kingdom west of Macedon. The region was mountainous, proud, and considered slightly uncivilized by some Greeks. Which is interesting because ancient Greeks called almost everyone uncivilized. They were not known for humility. Her birth name may have been Polyxena, or Myrtle. Ancient sources disagree because historians from 2,000 years ago occasionally treated facts the way modern people treat online rumours. She eventually became known as Olympias, likely after her husband won an Olympic victory. Ancient royals loved changing names. New marriage, new title, new political alliance, new name. Very efficient if your goal is confusing future historians. As a young princess, Olympias was likely educated in religion, royal customs and court politics, which sounds peaceful until you remember that royal politics in antiquity often resembled a very slow-moving knife fight. She married Philip II of Macedon. Now Philip deserves an entire documentary himself. Brilliant military commander, master strategist, builder of Macedon's power, also a man with several wives, because of course he was. Ancient kings frequently collected marriages the way modern people collect streaming subscriptions. Each marriage represented an alliance, a treaty, a political calculation. For royal women, marriage was rarely romantic. It was diplomacy wearing jewellery. Olympias entered Philip's court around 357 BCE, and immediately found herself navigating one of the most competitive royal environments in the ancient world. The Macedonian court was lively. By lively, I mean dangerous. Nobles competed for influence, generals competed for power, wives competed for their children's futures. Because succession in Macedon was not neatly organised, there was no strict rule guaranteeing inheritance, which meant royal families often solved succession disputes through methods historians politely call political elimination. Not ideal for family harmony. Olympias quickly established herself as a formidable presence. Ancient writers described her as passionate, intelligent, and deeply religious. She was reportedly involved in mystery cults associated with Dionysus. Ceremonies involving ecstatic rituals and sacred symbols fascinated many Greeks. Later writers even claimed she slept near snakes during religious ceremonies. Now, ancient historians loved dramatic stories, especially about powerful women. So some tales may be exaggerated. Ancient male writers had an unfortunate habit of describing influential women as mysterious, emotional, or dangerous. Meanwhile, ambitious men were called visionary leaders. Funny how that works. Then came the birth that would echo through history. Alexander, born in 356 BCE. Legend immediately wrapped itself around his arrival. One story claimed that on the night Alexander was conceived, Olympias dreamed of thunder striking her womb. Another claimed Philip dreamed of sealing her body with the image of a lion. Ancient biographies rarely met a dramatic prophecy they didn't enjoy. Because if someone later became famous, writers preferred to suggest the universe had left little hints, like cosmic spoilers. Alexander grew up under Olympias' influence during some of his earliest years. Sources suggest she nurtured in him a belief that he was destined for greatness, perhaps even divinely chosen. At times she was said to imply that his true father might be Zeus himself. Now this sounds extraordinary. But ancient rulers frequently connected themselves to gods. Divine ancestry was less unusual than modern people imagine, though telling your son he might be descended from Zeus is certainly one way to build confidence. Alexander apparently took such ideas seriously. Very seriously. As he grew older, stories of heroic ancestors shaped his identity. He admired Achilles. He studied Homer. He imagined greatness not as a possibility, but almost as an expectation. And Olympias likely encouraged those ambitions, whether out of maternal pride, political strategy, or both. Probably both. Royal parenting in antiquity often involved preparing children not merely to succeed, but to survive, especially in Macedon, because Philip's expanding family created a complicated web of heirs, and every new marriage threatened Alexander's future. Tension between Philip and Olympias gradually increased, partly due to politics, partly due to rival wives, and partly because royal marriages rarely aged gracefully. Philip eventually married Cleopatra Eurydice, a Macedonian noblewoman. This created immediate concern, because unlike Olympias, who came from Epirus, Cleopatra Eurydice was fully Macedonian. Her children might claim a stronger right to the throne, at least in the eyes of some nobles. Things reached a famous breaking point during a wedding feast, as royal disasters often do. During celebrations, a relative of Cleopatra reportedly suggested that Philip would soon produce a legitimate heir, which was not exactly subtle. Alexander became furious. An argument erupted. Philip, allegedly drunk, attempted to confront his son and promptly fell over. Imagine trying to attack your son and losing a battle against gravity. History can be unexpectedly human. Alexander reportedly remarked that here was a man who planned to conquer Asia, but could not walk across a room. An excellent insult, not ideal for family relations. Olympias soon left Macedon and returned to Epirus. Alexander temporarily departed as well. The royal household was fracturing, and then history took one of its sharp turns. In 336 BCE, Philip II was assassinated. The exact motives remain debated. Historians love debates. Ancient assassinations are especially difficult because nearly everyone had motives, and surviving evidence often resembles political gossip preserved for eternity. Some later writers accused Olympias of involvement. No conclusive proof exists, but her enemies certainly suspected her. Powerful women often attract accusations, sometimes deserved, sometimes not. What we do know is this. After Philip's death, Olympias moved swiftly, very swiftly. Cleopatra Eurydice and her family suffered tragic fates. Ancient politics could be extraordinarily brutal. Olympias ensured her son faced fewer rivals, whether driven by maternal protection, ambition, necessity, or some combination of all three remains difficult to know. History rarely gives us complete motives, only outcomes, and the outcome was clear. Alexander became king at just 20 years old. The young ruler inherited a kingdom, an army, and a future no one could yet imagine. As Alexander prepared for campaigns that would eventually stretch from Greece to India, Olympias remained an influential figure, even from afar. Letters reportedly passed between mother and son. Ancient writers suggest Olympias continued advising Alexander throughout his reign. Mothers remain mothers, even when their sons conquer half the known world. Alexander's relationship with Olympias appears to have been complex, deep affection mixed with occasional frustration, which, if we're being honest, sounds familiar to many families, only with fewer elephants and imperial ambitions. As Alexander marched eastward, new women entered the story, because conquest does not simply move armies, it moves cultures, languages, religions, families, and sometimes entire dynasties. Among the women whose lives would become intertwined with Alexander's empire, none is more famous than Roxana, or perhaps more mysterious. And as our quiet journey continues, we will soon meet the young woman from Bactria who married the most powerful man on earth. A marriage shaped by politics, by affection, and by an empire that grew too quickly for anyone to control. But for now, settle deeper into your blanket. Let the distant world of Macedon drift gently through your thoughts, and remember that history is often not just the story of conquerors. Sometimes it is the story of those who stood quietly beside them, even when history forgot to write their names in larger letters. As the years passed, Alexander's world became larger and larger, which, to be fair, was entirely his plan. Some people collect stamps, some people collect books. Alexander collected territories stretching across continents. It was an ambitious hobby. By his mid-20s he had defeated the mighty Persian Empire, crossed deserts that sensible people would have avoided, and marched his armies farther east than many Greeks thought possible. His empire expanded rapidly, perhaps too rapidly. Empires, like houses, can become unstable if built faster than they can be managed. And into this enormous world stepped a young woman named Roxana. History remembers her simply as Alexander's wife. But like many women in ancient history, her story is far more complicated than a single title. Roxana was born in Bactria, a region in Central Asia that today roughly overlaps parts of modern Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan. Ancient Bactria sat at the crossroads of civilizations. Cultures met there, traders passed through, armies arrived, and occasionally conquerors decided to stay for a while. Not always by invitation. Roxana was the daughter of a Bactrian noble named Oxyates. Her family belonged to the local elite, though exactly how powerful they were remains debated. Ancient sources rarely provide complete biographies for women, a frustrating habit of history. We know kings, we know generals. But many women's lives survive only in fragments, little pieces scattered across time. Alexander encountered Roxana around 327 BCE during his campaigns in Central Asia. The region had proven surprisingly difficult to control. Conquering territory was one thing, keeping it was another. Local resistance persisted. Mountain strongholds remained active, and Alexander, despite his remarkable military abilities, discovered that mountains are notoriously difficult to negotiate with. One famous fortress became central to the story, the Sogdian Rock, a seemingly impregnable stronghold perched high above the landscape. Its defenders reportedly claimed that Alexander would need soldiers with wings to capture it, which in retrospect was perhaps unwise, because if history teaches us anything, it is that telling Alexander something cannot be done often encouraged him to do exactly that. Alexander's men scaled the cliffs. The fortress surrendered. And somewhere in the aftermath, Alexander met Roxana. Ancient historians, always fond of romance, describe Alexander as being immediately captivated by her beauty. One writer even claimed she was the most beautiful woman in Asia. Ancient historians truly loved ranking people. Most beautiful, greatest king, strongest warrior. Human civilization has apparently enjoyed lists for thousands of years. Whether Alexander truly fell in love is difficult to determine. Historians remain cautious. Ancient royal marriages almost always carried political significance. Love may have existed. Politics certainly did. Marrying Roxana helped strengthen ties with local elites. It signalled that Alexander intended not merely to conquer Asia, but to integrate with it. This was unusual. Many conquerors remained outsiders. Alexander increasingly embraced a broader imperial identity. Greek, Macedonian, Persian. Perhaps something entirely new. His marriage to Roxana symbolised that vision. Ancient accounts describe a simple ceremony, according to local customs. Alexander reportedly cut bread with his sword and shared it with Roxana. A symbolic act, simple, elegant, and considerably less expensive than many modern weddings, though admittedly involving more military campaigns. For Roxana, marriage brought immense prestige, but also uncertainty. Becoming the wife of the most powerful ruler on earth sounds glamorous, until one remembers that his profession was essentially constant warfare. Alexander rarely remained still. His army moved endlessly, across rivers, across deserts, across mountains. At times it must have felt as though the entire empire was permanently packing luggage. Roxana joined this moving world, and like many royal women she lived within the demands of dynastic politics. Royal marriages carried enormous expectations: produce heirs, strengthen alliances, maintain influence, and do all this while navigating court rivalries. No pressure. Alexander's court itself was becoming increasingly diverse. Persian nobles joined Macedonian officers, Eastern traditions mixed with Greek customs. Some welcomed these changes, others did not. Macedonian veterans sometimes viewed Alexander's adoption of Persian practices with suspicion. After all, cultural blending sounds pleasant in theory. In practice, people have strong opinions about clothing, ceremonies, and who gets invited to important banquets. Human nature changes slowly, very slowly. Alexander even adopted elements of Persian royal ceremony. This included proskinesis, a form of court ritual involving bowing. Many Greeks disliked it intensely. To them, such practices seemed appropriate for gods or Persian kings, not fellow humans. Alexander's attempts at cultural integration occasionally resembled a man trying to unite multiple civilizations, while everyone quietly complained in the background. An ancient version of difficult management. Roxana occupied a unique place within this evolving empire. She represented the eastern lands, a bridge between worlds, at least in theory. Reality, as usual, was more complicated, because royal courts are rarely peaceful, and empires rarely remain stable. As Alexander continued eastward into India, his army grew weary, very weary. Years of campaigning had taken their toll. The soldiers had marched thousands of miles. Many had not seen home in nearly a decade. They had fought countless battles, crossed unfamiliar lands, and probably developed strong opinions about endless military expeditions. Eventually, at the Hyphasis River, the army refused to go farther. Even Alexander could not conquer exhaustion. Sometimes history turns not on battles, but on collective fatigue. The men simply wanted to go home, a remarkably understandable desire. Alexander reluctantly agreed. The long return journey began, but fate had different plans. In 324 BCE, Alexander held one of the most extraordinary events of his reign. The mass weddings at Susa. Thousands participated. Macedonian officers married Persian noblewomen. Alexander himself married 2 Persian princesses, Stateira, daughter of Darius III, and Parysatis, daughter of Artaxerxes III. Because apparently one royal marriage was not politically sufficient. Why stop at one alliance when you can collect several? For Roxana, these marriages changed everything. She was no longer Alexander's only wife. Polygamy among ancient rulers was common, but common does not necessarily mean emotionally simple. Human emotions remain complicated across every century. Roxana's position suddenly became more precarious. Persian princesses carried immense prestige.